So I'm going to talk you through how to run a independent t-test analysis, and this type of analysis is beneficial when you are comparing two averages. So primarily you'll have an independent variable and a dependent variable, and you want to look at the effects of that independent variable on the dependent variable, whereby you will only have two groups. So if you have more than two groups or more than two conditions, a t-test cannot really be used. In this case it should be fine, because we want to look at the effects of alcohol dose on maths score, maths ability, and the manipulation is that we have given 8 people a low dose of alcohol and 8 people a high dose of alcohol, and then run them through a maths test just to see if there would be any differences on average for the maths score between the low dose group and the high dose group. So all the independent t-test will do is see if there is a significant difference between the average of the low dose group and the average of the high dose group. Okay, if there is a significant difference, we can conclude that our manipulation has worked. If there is no significant difference, then we can assume that changing the dose of alcohol does not impact on maths ability. Now, before you run the analysis, you can see here the data is in data view. You have your independent variable in the first column, alcohol, and maths score in the second column, maths score being out of 100. Now what I've done here is I've given a 1 or a 2 depending on what group the participant is in. So if they've been given a number 1, that means they're in the low dose group. If they've been given a number 2, it means they're in the high dose group. If you click on variable view, you can see what this really means. So in variable view, each variable will correspond to a row if it's a between subjects design, which it is. So we have alcohol as one row and maths score in the second row. You'll notice though, with alcohol in the values column, this is where I've told SPSS, okay, the low dose group are going to be referred to as number 1 and the high dose group will be referred to as number 2. It's really important that you do this before you run any analysis that use a categorical variable or a grouping variable such as alcohol. If you don't do this, if you don't assign a value to each of your groups or conditions, SPSS won't be able to give you accurate data. So it's up to you which numbers you use. I've just gone for 1 and 2, some people use 0 and 1 or whatever, but obviously you've got to remember what numbers you correspond to each group. So I've given a 1 for low dose, 2 for high dose. Another thing as well, although in this video clip I won't be making any graphs, it is important that in the measure column in variable view, you have selected the appropriate option. So when you have a categorical variable, you should really be putting it on nominal, and when you have a dependent variable or something that is continuous, you can leave it on scale. So for this case, alcohol would be nominal and maths score would be scale. Okay, so let's run the t-test analysis. If you click on Analyze, everything we do here will be clicking on Analyze to begin with. Then Compare Means, and then find the option that says Independent Samples t-test. Now you'll notice that there are several t-tests that you can do. We're doing an independent samples one because we have different groups. We're comparing the average of the low dose group with the average of the high dose group. Okay, so click on Independent Samples t-test. You should see a window like this. Remember, all variables begin on the left hand side and you have to decide which ones transfer over to the right and in which places as well. So in this case you can see that it says grouping variable. That basically corresponds to independent variable or factor, the thing that you're manipulating. So we're manipulating alcohol. If you click that over to where it says grouping variable, you'll then see that it says alcohol question mark question mark. That means it needs 2 groups or 2 conditions, otherwise we can't really run the t-test at all. If you click on define groups underneath this, you can see now it says group 1, group 2. SPSS at this stage is asking you, what does group 1 mean and what does group 2 mean? Well, in this case, group 1 will be number 1, which is the low dose group, and group 2 in the comparison will be group 2, which is the high dose alcohol group. So type in 1 and 2 in those boxes, click on continue, and then lastly you can transfer over math score to the big box that says test variables. So you can put in as many of these dependent variables as you like and run a series of t-tests if you wish to, but in this case we're only going to run one. And you can mess around with options if you want. I'm going to leave everything as it is and click on OK. Okay, so you can now see in the output window that SPSS has given us two boxes or two tables. The first of which, called group statistics, really just talks you through some descriptive statistics. So how many people were in each group, 8 in the first group, 8 in the second group, what the averages were. So you can see for the low dose alcohol group the average math score was 77.88, and for the high dose it was 56.88. so we know there is a difference there, but we don't know at this stage whether that difference is significant. This box won't tell you that. If you go underneath, you can see the independent samples test box. This is where you find out whether these two averages are significantly different from each other. Do you have an effect of alcohol on math score? And if you use the box and look at where it says significance, so in other words the probability of finding this result, you can see that you have a value of 0.000, and in order for something to be significant it has to be a number under 0.05. okay, now 0.000 or 0.000 is very much under 0.05, so we know we do have a significant effect of alcohol on math score. In other words, the averages of the low dose group and the high dose group are significantly different from each other.